Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Sorry, we were having technical difficulties. And so I was trying to get a microphone to work, but now I think we've got it. So hopefully you guys can hear me. I apologize for getting in late, but once again, I was on a different live stream and I just figured out thing. So I apologize for the delay. Here's a couple of things that are going on, and it's pretty important that a lot of talk about red wave and enthusiasm for what was going to happen, and right now I have to tell you uh, my top end kind of expectations are not being met. We have there's some pickups that are occurring around the country, but by and large, what we're seeing is a a real battle in places that I thought where the Democrats were going to pretty much collapse, and so we're now looking at places like in Virginia 7, which Yesli Vega led the entire way. Absentee ballots and late and early voting is now being counted, and a significant lead has basically been eaten up, and she's now behind by 1.8% of the votes, 98% counted. It appears as though the Democrats are going to lose Virginia 2. Virginia 2 is down in Virginia Beach, a hotly contested race. The district gets sent back and forth all the time, and so that's one House race that the Republicans are flipping. Florida, real big news in Florida. Obviously Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio just crushed, and it was and the Republicans picked up one seat. Luna won Charlie Crist's seat, so that's a flip of a Republican to a Republican seat. And a little note, Charlie Crist is now the first person in Florida history to lose statewide as a Republican, as an independent, and as a Democrat. Congratulations, Charlie Crist. You have made history as the all-time loser in Florida politics. We had some other things in Georgia. While Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock, Democrat, initially had opened up a big lead based on the votes coming in from largely Democrat areas. Herschel Walker is pulled ahead, but both of them, excuse me, both of them are below the 50% threshold. In Georgia, it's one of those states that, if you remember from 2 years ago, if nobody gets 50% plus one, then it goes to a runoff, and that runoff would be held in December. So it is and many analysts have been predicting that would be a runoff. I think there is some momentum looking that Herschel Walker might be able to get above the 50% threshold, but that race is certainly too close to call. Once again, I'll go to Florida because a lot of people thought that Marco Rubio might be in some trouble, and Marco Rubio is not in trouble. Marco Rubio overwhelmingly won. We're looking for there are some other races which, because I don't know where the votes are coming in from, it's hard to determine. But in New Hampshire, where Don Bolduc had polled even and in fact had moved ahead in polls of Maggie Hassan, incumbent Maggie Hassan. It was a race that kind of was late breaking and got on the scene late, but it's a race that at this juncture doesn't look like it's coming together. It's now I remain hopeful on it, but it's not the one to look at is New Hampshire 1, the House race, which right now is tooth and nail, trading leads, and that's only with about 25% of the vote in the last time I looked, which was about 10 minutes ago. On the southern Texas border, there were some Republicans had hoped that there would be a sweep of Hispanic Republicans on the Texas border. Myra Flores right now is losing to another incumbent in a district that was crammed together. Cuellar, who Representative Cuellar, who's a Democrat, there was high hopes that he would lose. Right now, he's ahead. But once again, we don't know who those votes are, where those votes are coming from. And the results are still way too early to draw any conclusions from. So here we did an analysis, and for those of you who read our publication, dailytorch.com, and get our emails, I would suggest that you do sign up for the emails, subscribe, go to dailytorch.com and subscribe. But one of the things that Robert Romano put together was he was looking across the nation at places that were potentially bellwether states. And believe it or not, Delaware was a place that he identified as a bellwether. And the things that he noted was if the House district, that's one single House district, gets 64, 65% Democrat in Delaware, it means it's going to be a very good year for the Democrats. If it gets around 54% for the Republicans, it means it's going to be an extraordinarily good year for the Republicans. It was about 58% in the victory margin, or how the Democrats are leading in Delaware, which indicates it should be a good year for Republicans, probably 25, 30 seat pickup, 20 to 30 seat pickup, but perhaps not a great year, not the red wave that some of us had been hoping for. I hate being Mr. Bad News. There are some races, one of the things that we're keeping a real strong look on, and that is the Pennsylvania race, where, believe it or not, 1 million Pennsylvanians have voted for Fetterman. That's pretty strange. I just was on an interview with former Representative Paul Brown from Georgia, and looking at the Georgia race, he indicated that a lot of the places that had fully reported all the precincts were in fact historically Democrat minority areas, and so it's in Georgia, once again, unless you know where the votes are being counted from, it's hard to get a sense of it. But he was feeling pretty positive towards the Herschel Walker race. Rand Paul, who nobody thought was in trouble, won overwhelmingly. We have, and so you have I'm going to just go Jerry Denson. I wish a red wave, but what I'm saying is not happening. I want Nancy out of the driver's seat. Jerry, I think Nancy's going to be out of the driver's seat. The Republicans only have to pick up 6. I think the Republicans will easily pick up 6. But the question was whether or not a Republican majority would be able to assert its will. And unless you're getting well above 235 up into 240 territory in terms of Republican majority, it's really hard because truthfully, a lot of those Republicans aren't going to be coming in. The fact is they're not going to want to vote to impeach and do things like that. And so you have a much less aggressive McCarthy, the lower number of margin he has. Now, I'm going to say that there are that what we have and in Virginia, if the pickup is one seat, that means it's still going to be a good year. It just doesn't mean it's going to be a great year. Okay. I spent time in the Vega district. I endorsed, I gave money to Vega. I worked the precincts in Vegas district today. And the fact she doesn't appear to be coming in, that race may not be coming in based on my conversations with the campaign no more than a couple, maybe 15 minutes ago, is disappointing. I was really hoping that would happen. A race to watch that's tooth and nail right now is the Maryland 6, which is a race it's Western Maryland. It's a large, it's basically a dead even district. David Trone, who's the Democratic incumbent, is one of the wealthiest people in Congress and spent a lot of money. Neil Parrott, who's the Republican state legislator from the district, basically got no money. He had zero money to spend. And so you look at it and you say, The question in Maryland 6 is, did the National Republican Congressional Committee deliberately boot the election? I mean, that's a very strong possibility. I still think Parrott wins, but it's a tougher race than it should be. Let's see, what else are we going to talk about? It'll be interesting to see what happens. It looks like J.D. Vance is pulled into a lead in Ohio the last time I checked. But that Pennsylvania race is going to be, it really has to be top of mind, because if Pennsylvania elects John Fetterman over Oz, if they elect John Fetterman, a guy who can't function, then we really have to evaluate whether Pennsylvania is a state that's in play for 2024. I think we have to take a real hard look at what's true and what's not true about that state. I guess our Commonwealth. Now some good news is in New York State, Lee Zeldin, who's running for governor, is actually running ahead of what he needs to do in New York City. He's getting about 32% of the vote in New York City. He needs to get 30 in order to have a chance to win statewide. He's about 32% right now in New York City, and that's with a significant portion of the vote in. And so Zeldin is in the game in terms of winning the New York City or New York State governorship, which would be a giant feather in the hat. And the answer to your question is who voted for. Somebody asked who voted for Fetterman. I'll clean it up. The answer was, I can't imagine who voted for Fetterman, but I'm going to just tell you that there was that there's 1 million people who apparently voted for Fetterman, and I can't explain it. Let's talk about. We do need Smiley to win in Washington. One of the things that's going to be interesting is, since states in the West were like in Oregon, where you have mail-in voting exclusively, and there's no momentum whatsoever in terms of any of this stuff. What's going to happen when there's no momentum? You've already had all the votes that are cast, through the mail. You have no turnout on election day. It doesn't matter if it rained or was sunny. And you sit there and you look at it and you say, well, is the Republican going to win the governorship of Oregon? The polls seem to indicate that there was a good chance the Republican would win that governorship. The polls seem to indicate the Republicans could pick up 2 or 3 congressional seats in Oregon, which would be astonishing. But we'll see. What we know is that a lot of places that it looked like they were breaking for Republicans is about 50-50. This is a extremely competitive election. It means the Democrats were able to get people out to vote, and the Democratic intensity matched the Republican intensity, which is somewhat astonishing, truthfully. And so that's somewhat astonishing. I just got it in that Pennsylvania, Fox News just called Pennsylvania governor for Democrat Shapiro, which is interesting because a lot of the reports I was getting out of Philadelphia today was that the Philadelphia turnout numbers were abysmal. And if Philadelphia turnout numbers were abysmal, as I was being told, then there's no way Fetterman or Shapiro could win. So with the Fox News calling Pennsylvania for Shapiro, one has to guess that report about the turnout in Pennsylvania that I got was erroneous. Let's see what else we got here. And we've heard in Arizona, if you've been paying attention to that, in Maricopa County, which constitutes 60% of the Arizona electorate, it's Phoenix and Phoenix suburbs. We had all those problems in Maricopa in 2020. Well, the Maricopa County government, which is, by the way, supposedly Republican, is at it again. The 20% of the polling places the place where you kind of register your ballot, the scanners, didn't work. Were rejecting ballots, and and the people who are working this polling place would say, okay, well, we'll put your ballot into a box and we'll carry it into the headquarters and we'll count it later. And people, and there's big, bunch of legal stuff going on there about that. But the fact is, in Maricopa County, 1/5 of the people in Maricopa County, about 12% of the electorate in Arizona, their machines didn't function. They just flat out didn't function, and it's that's and there's a lot of lawsuits and fighting over that right now. It's I've got friends out there, and they're pretty, shall I say, pretty pissed off. Um, so you've got that going on in Arizona. Katie Hobbs, the candidate for governor, who refused to debate Carrie Lake, happens to be the Secretary of State who oversees the elections. No conflict of interest there. But that is and so that's what's happening in Arizona. The polls haven't closed there yet, so we're really not getting anything. I will tell you that one of the things that are it's clear to me is Ron DeSantis should have proven to all Republicans what you need to do. He overwhelmingly won. He won by 12% in a state that used to be a toss-up state. Remember last year or 4 years ago when he won, he was in a race that was within 1%. So he's convinced the people of Florida he's doing a great job. And what Republicans have to learn from this is that when you go off and you're aggressively doing your job and fighting for freedom, you get rewarded. And if you sit on your hands and you kind of play games, well, you don't. And so that's kind of the lesson. We will see once again. We'll see what happens with some of these races. I still have some hope in New Hampshire. I have hope in Pennsylvania. In Wisconsin, Ron Johnson. I looked about 15 minutes before I came on, so Ron Johnson was down by a couple points, but only 30% of the vote had been tallied. We were looking at places like a race in open seat in Wisconsin for the House. Ron Kind retired. The Republican was down by about 1.5 in the La Crosse area. That's the western edge of the state, and and quite honestly, that is a very tight race. But I will be surprised if the Republican doesn't win that race. Just up front, I do radio in La Crosse at least once a week on the Mike Hayes show, WIZM, and I just spend a little time thinking about it, spend a little time looking at it because I'm on the air there all the time, and I would be surprised if the Republican nominee doesn't win. But once again, it's a dogfight, and so one of the things we're sitting here, we're watching, rather than, I'll just be honest. I expected a number of these races to be blowouts. Okay, 5.7 point wins in races that were toss-ups a month ago. I really expected that to be the case, and and those things aren't happening. And so if this trend continues, the Republicans will pick up seats, but they're not going to pick up the number of seats that are going to. They'll get operational control of the House and operational control of the Senate, but they won't functionally have control to be able to drive a hard agenda against Joe Biden, and the chance to stop a lot of the Biden agenda by rolling back his regulations through using the power of the purse is going to be significantly limited. So let's hope these results turn around a little bit. But I do want to, once again, if you look at Florida, it's the example of what you should do. And Marco Rubio won by 11, 10, 11 points. DeSantis won by 12, and we picked up a House seat in Florida. And Florida, the congressional districts are pretty darn red right now. And so Florida's actually become a pretty much a solid Republican state. And I think it's just one of those things where we look at it and we say, there's a way we need to govern. And that is be aggressive, be tough, be smart. Let's see here. I'm going to look through here and see if I can find some. Yeah. In California, we've got Kelly Buster. In California, there's a couple of some races in there. There's about 4 or 5 races where Republicans could win House seats in California. The chances at the top, Newsom's isn't gonna be beaten for governor, most likely. But there are about 4 or 5 races where the Democrats hold seats that Republicans can win. There's 3 or 4 where Republicans hold seats where the Democrats can win. And so we're going to watch, all the way across the country. And the challenge with California is they take an awful long time to actually count their mail-in ballots. And as a result, for instance, 4 years ago, David Valadeo out of Central California, where my wife grew up, he was ahead by 5% after election night. And by the time they got done counting all the ballots that kept showing up, he lost. And so it's it's hard to gather. You can't draw conclusions necessarily from the election day results in California. But, the fact is the control of the House and whether or not Kevin McCarthy is speaker, I hope and pray this doesn't occur, but it may come down to 9 districts in California. With both Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi both being from California, it could be really interesting. There's a couple of districts 3 districts in the Central Valley, 2 Democrat districts and 1 Republican district that are up in the air. There are 3 districts in Orange County, California, that have 1 Democrat, 2 Republican districts that could flip one way or the other. There's Riverside County District, Ken Calvert, who used to represent where I grew up in Corona, California, Corona, Norco. And his district is not as easy of a win as it might be. So there's a Northern California district that's also potential pickup. So you've got so we may be looking at California a week from now, trying to figure out who the speaker is. I pray that that's not the case, but right now, once again, I think we're likely to see a Republican pickups in the House. But my presumption of 54 in the Senate, realistically, I got to take it to 52, and we aren't there yet. And I thought by this time of night we would be there, and so it's just a lot tougher sledding than a lot of the polls showed it would be. And that means, in Arizona, where Mark Kelly has consistently been about 1% up in the polls, I really thought that that Masters would have an advantage with the momentum and late votes coming his way. And if that's not the case, Arizona might, who knows what happens. I hope that, Kerry Lake was further ahead in the polls. But, the polls, who knows if the polls, whether we're going to sit there and question the validity of the polls. I know a lot of people are questioning the validity of the election. I'm not willing to go there, largely because I don't speculate. I have to see something that tells me that that's true. So that's kind of where we are on this thing. I was hoping I'd be on here and we'd have a big party, but right now, It's too early to have a party, and it's also too early to have a wake. But this idea of being a tsunami, I don't think there's a tsunami. I'm just hoping we have some kind of that we get some wave. Remember, in off-year elections, when with an incumbent president, the other party, the average pickup is 31 seats. That's the average historical pickup over the last 100 years. So that's what before post FDR. Okay, you have to get outside the Great Depression. So let's say the last 50 years. And so that 31 seats, the Republicans are going to struggle to get to that 31 seats. But if they can get 25, that still puts them at 237, and which is a workable majority. So it's right now we're going to have to look at races like, there are Iowa races. There are there's a couple of Michigan races. There's in Texas, we'll see what if we pick up seats in Texas. And so we're just going to see, kind of now piecing it together across the country. An example of a disappointment. I thought we were going to win the congressional race in Rhode Island. And right now it doesn't look like that's going to come in. And so you just look at some of those ones that, Republicans had the potential of having 5-6 seats in New England. And right now it's very possible that the Republicans are going to come out of New England with 0 seats, which is where we started. It's where we started. But if you don't have, the expectation was that we have a really good chance in New Hampshire. One still do. I need to look at some of these races for just a second and just to kind of get a sense of where we are at this juncture. Let's look at New Hampshire. When you look at New Hampshire, okay, right now in Maine, Bruce Poliquin, a Republican in Maine, is 35% of the vote counted, is down by 4 points. Now, the good news is in Maryland, Maryland 6, which I talked about, Neil Parrott is at 64% of the vote in. Parrott's at 40, is up by about 9 points on the incumbent David Trone. That is good news. But New Hampshire 1, where it's only 31% of the vote in, but they're right now the Republican candidate's down by about 5, with 31% in. The bad news for New Hampshire is in the other district, there's only 2 districts in New Hampshire. The Democrat is winning by significant margin. And when you look at the Senate race, that's bad news because you count up the votes for the Democrat in the Senate. You count up the two districts, and they have to even out. And if the Republican's not winning and is 5 points down in New Hampshire 1, which is the Republican side, and 12 points down, 15 points down in the Democrat side, Democrat district in New Hampshire, that doesn't bode well for picking up the Senate seat. So again, I'm going to look down to that's just the District 7 in Virginia just fell apart with early votes coming in, just crushed Vega. That's a real disappointment. And in that Wisconsin district I was talking about, La Crosse, the Republicans now leading by 1.5%. That would be a pickup, 45% of the vote in. But once again, in Texas, some races that were considered to favor Republicans, the Democrats are leading with relative single digits. Oh, is that right? I'm having a hard time seeing this. They put these numbers in really small. No, it's a pretty significant percentage of the vote in. We're looking at Democrat winning 15, which is a Hispanic district. by 9 votes at this 9% at this point. We're looking at, and that's a race that Republicans seem to be favoring Republicans going in. Cuellar is beating Garcia 56-44. And so we're looking at a scenario where one of the things Republicans were hoping for was a Hispanic wave, and quite honestly, it doesn't appear to be happening. Bad news, but it is the truth. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, if you guys have any questions, please ask them, and I will endeavor to answer them. Let's see here. Let me see if I can get back into my StreamYard. There we go. Okay, so let's see here. I got one started comment, live comments. Now, one thing in Michigan, for those of you who are in Michigan, it does appear that John James is ahead, which is a good thing. It's a Michael Mattis. I'm gonna just put this on. I guess people love high gas and food prices and crime up there. That's a great question, and it's and I will tell you my experience in the, once again, it's one district. It was a Democrat precinct that I was put into, but there were a number of people who came up and who basically said the ads run against Yesli Vega basically said she wanted to force everybody to have a kid and didn't believe people could get pregnant when they were raped and all that, and it was false. It was a misrepresentation of what she said. At best, it was a three Pinocchio lie. But the fact of the matter is, they ran that ad over and over and over, and Vega is evangelical. She's pro-life, and quite honestly, and this is just a blunt assessment, the pro-life community are the big losers in this if the Republicans don't get a major gain, because I believe that many people the Republicans are going to look at it and they're going to say, listen, our support for pro-life cost us 15, 20 seats. And truthfully, when people were coming up, that was the question they were asking, was on life issues. So that's going to be a big deal. And if the abortion issue turns out to have been an issue that changed the face of this election, it'll be a Pyrrhic victory to have had the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, because Congress will be empowered and Republicans will help them to pass legislation that puts into law abortion is the law of the land. So there's some ramifications here that if it does turn out that the interpretation is that abortion costs Republican seats, it's going to be hard. And there's a vote in the Senate in the lame duck that's scheduled for the lame duck that deals with transgenders. And if the interpretation is social cultural issues hurt Republicans, it's going to be really hard to beat that vote. I'm just telling you, and that's something we're going to be talking about. I'm not getting a lot of a lot of red wave, go red wave. One of the, I'm going to just put this machine thing. So what a deal. Machines quit working in one place and run out of ballads and sound familiar. Yeah, it does. And one of the things that's interesting in all this is that there was there was a system-wide failure in one state of the machines, and it begs the question: since the machines are not supposed to be interconnected through the internet, how can you have a system-wide failure? So it's just you sit there and it just tells you that the machines are all online, they are interconnected, and system-wide failures in our voting machines quite honestly, shouldn't be tolerated, and it's and both sides of the aisle should reject it. Um, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to break away, and we're going to do a recap tomorrow on this when we get a little more data. But for now, I'm going to just bow my head and say prayer for America. Lord, we lift up America. We lift up our great country. We ask that you provide us blessings. We ask that you provide us with fair and honest elections, and just make certain that the people's will is heard through these elections. Lord, we know that whatever is decided is what's decided, and that everything is in your hands. But we do ask for you to deliver us from an oppressive administration that denies freedom. And, but we are, you're sovereign, we're not. And we just ask that you be with this great country and strengthen us in our resolve to bring glory to you and to save our great nation. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And with that, I'm going to let you all go. Thank you very much. And we will come back on tomorrow when I'm able to do a little more analysis on some of this stuff. Thank you and good night.